Good morning. 11:13 a.m. on Tuesday, December 31st, 2019 in Sarasota, Florida. This is recording number 2 of, I'm just going to bundle it and call it Ecuador Revealing Truth. Supposed to be in Ecuador right now. I was unable to take the trip. The reason I was unable to take the trip was because I learned while attempting to check in for the actual flight this past Saturday that in order to go to Ecuador, it is one country of apparently many that you need to have your trip completed while you still have 6 months remaining on your passport. It's not a U.S. government rule law. It's not a Delta, the airline with whom I was intended to fly. It is not a Delta requirement law rule. This is an Ecuadorian. This is an Ecuador-based law and rule. One that clearly I had no awareness of, not quite sure how I could have been expected to have the awareness of. With that said, I'm also going to work to encourage folks that genuinely want to, be with me through like sort of the A to Z processing of this, because this is big. This is big. And likely the reasons for this happening are going to continue to reveal themselves as more time passes. So I'm actually, if you have an interest, I think the most can be gained by sort of starting from the beginning, which would be the video. It's an audio, but it's on my YouTube channel. It's an audio only. It's just under an hour. And the title of it is Ecuador Revealing Truth. That recording was done 9.5 hours after I was turned away from the counter at Delta at Sarasota International. And obviously I've been processing this ever since. The other big piece here in why this is going to lead to so many things in so many ways, many of which are not really clear yet. The place to which I was supposed to be flying, owned by a spiritual couple that identifies as spiritual, has identified. They've been out in in their own circle. It's not small. They've been out there 18 years doing this kind of work. And I'm not yet, I don't know that I'll ever actually reveal their names. And I'm not going to go into why the explanation of that feeling here. But suffice to say, they're not refunding. Like I'm continue to be forced to accept that the reality, they're not refunding anything. They've accepted no responsibility. When in actuality, I believe I'm not particularly fond of blame for the sake of blame. But they have accepted zero responsibility, zero accountability, despite the fact that they advertise and their audience, if you will, is very much global. And so people from many countries travel to their little place, and they have not faced this situation before, according to what they've said. And the way that they've handled it, and the way that they handled it from moment one, immediately I knew I was done. After 9 plus years of these folks they were one of the first influences. They were one of the first right at my time of my own personal awakening. And I think that's one of the reasons I have a hard time letting go when I have a hard time of letting go of things. And even when it's become clear that for one reason or another, they need to be let go of. There were definitely some red flags triggered for me. But I didn't want to believe it. And I didn't have any reason to believe that these folks, were anything but what they were claiming to be. And so this recording, again, I'm going to try to, encourage anybody listening to this to, if you're at this point in it now, go back before I get to the primary thing the second recording here is going to be, which is me reading the letter, the final communication to them that I sent yesterday. I would encourage you to just listen to the first recording. Again, if you're at all interested in sort of having a front row seat to me learning a lesson that as I get to further recordings, I'm going to the goal is to identify some high level categories or high level aspects of what I'm learning that I hope somebody can take something from my experience and apply it, if not to something going on in their life right now, just almost as something in the back of their head if they ever were to face something like this. So again, sorry for the sort of nebulous general, I'm just going to jump in. So I wrote, and anybody that knows me a little bit knows, very thorough. I'm succinct is not really a word that gets associated with me very often. From the moment their response came in, their initial response, mind you, they wouldn't even allow me to speak to them in person. The woman who's their like gatekeeper, the husband of this couple, he and I exchanged a couple of emails, and I pretty much knew instantly with his first response and how they were handling it. I was done with them, and I knew pretty much that they were going to do exactly what they're doing, which is not refunding me a single penny. But I also knew that I needed to compose a final communication where I was sharing, the back and forth that I did on Saturday. I was still polite. To be honest, I was giving them an opportunity to take some responsibility and own, and be accountable for at least a part of what transpired. So I was refraining from really sharing what I was even beginning to feel. Plus, I was understandably still in the throes of the emotion of this trip that was so big for me, being ripped out from under me. And I really do not believe there was any way I could or should have known that this was going to happen. So it's been a very shocking, one of the most shocking, biggest lessons I've ever learned, one of the most expensive lessons I will have learned thus far in my life, and truly shocking on multiple levels. So I wanted to give myself all day on Sunday, which I did. This all happened on Saturday. The first recording is done Saturday night regarding this. All day Sunday, I just, for the first half of the day, I was still almost immobilized, with, I just still was kind of in a state of shock. I did a lot of communication with my parents, my mom and my dad, separately with just different aspects. My dad was on the phone, I guess, with the hotel. He works sort of in the hotel business, and with this hotel in Ecuador, trying to get me the money back. But I knew I didn't ask him to do that. I could have told him that was probably going to be a futile effort, because it was now under 24 hours. Had I known this was going to be an issue more than that, I could have gotten at least that money back. But very expensive lesson, and Sunday was spent really, I know it's hard for parents to watch their children at any age learn tough lessons. And so I know this was tough for my parents to kind of be there with me as I just kind of worked through it. And the goal was to work through it as quickly as possible. So I knew I wasn't going to send this communication. The earliest it was going to get sent to them was yesterday, Monday. And I did. I sent it 2 p.m.-ish. So now, without further explanation, I just want this second recording. The primary thing I wanted to capture was simply me reading this correspondence. And I'm going to leave out their, and I only use their first names anyway in the address, but I'm going to leave their names out, and I'm going to leave the name out of their facility. And I'll just say facility. Okay, so this is the final communication. I did this more for my own sake. Absolutely for my own sake. I do not anticipate, not sure that even though I sent this as a response to the husband with whom I was email communicating, after I requested to speak to them in person, I made that request of their gatekeeper, I'll call her. She forwarded that one-line request to the husband. He and I went back and forth with 2 emails. This was sent as a response to that. However, I won't go into the details why, but I'm led to believe, and I don't even know if this is possible, but I'm led to believe that that response didn't even get to him. I think it went back to only the gatekeeper being able to see this. And while I absolutely believe she is integral because she's the one that handles all the business and bookings of all their business side of their work, I'm not having any expectation that she will pass this on to them if in fact it didn't reach them directly. And even if it did reach them directly, I don't imagine that they would read all the way through it, because it is typical of me and me honoring myself and how I communicate. It's not short. I have it in Google Docs. I sent it to them via email, but in Google Docs, it's knocking on 3 pages. And so that's why I know it's more for me, way more for me than on any false hope that these folks are going to do the right thing. They showed their character immediately. So I'm not expecting that this affects them to change. I'm not expecting to get my money back. I'm not even expecting that they will read it, receive it, and if so, that they will even read it. However, I do feel that it matters to have composed this and to at least make the attempt, because I do believe that, you know, even though this might not affect them specifically in sort of the most direct kind of human form, on a higher level, putting this out into the universe, if you will, I just think it matters. I think it matters that I sent this, that I composed it, and that I sent it. And I know that at a minimum, it was very powerful for me to take the time to do this. I had started notes for it on Saturday night, but I was not able to get very far. I added a few more notes, on Sunday, like kind of, I guess you could call it drafts. So I kind of had a first draft on Friday night, a much longer second draft on Sunday. And then yesterday when I got up in the morning, so after sleeping on this for a couple of nights and speaking to my parents and just being with myself with this and speaking with my amazing friend, Kathy down the street, she's so much more than a friend that I don't even know what to say. But after, processing it with my parents and Kathy and myself and sleeping on it for 2 nights, I got up yesterday and composed this in about an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then I sent it a few hours later. So here we go. So I address them by name, and here it begins. For over 9 years, I have been with you. I have purchased your books. I have purchased your classes, and I have referred a few others your way that I know have done the same. I listened to you when you only had one show per week on BBS radio, and I continued to grow with you as you moved to new platforms on Facebook and YouTube and expanded the number of shows. During weeks I didn't listen live, I would almost always go back to the archives. Well beyond my attention and my money, though, you were the recipients of what I feel is the most valuable and precious aspect of any human, my trust. I have struggled a great deal in my 44 years because of my high level of compassion, honesty, integrity, and trust. These are things for which I will never make a conscious compromise. I thought it was challenging out in the mainstream world, but in the past 9+ years of living as a fully awakened human, navigating the spiritual world, and most notably, those individuals who identify as spiritual, has been exponentially more difficult. Because as we all know, we do that navigation through our egos, personalities, and that aspect of all of us remains very human. I approach all people with the benefit of the doubt that 1, they are what they claim to be, and 2, that they are all good until they give me a reason to believe otherwise. Again, this approach has placed me in positions, situations, and in relationships that a less trusting person would never find themselves facing. However, even before my awakening, I knew that the heaven on earth world I sensed existed here would not be revealed to me if I went around trusting no one and disengaging in life. So there was no way around it. I had a lot of emotional maturing to do and discernment to gain when it came to navigating the human aspect of living spirit. Unfortunately for me, you all have become teachers in a way I wasn't hoping to experience. If I'm being honest, the red flags really began to go up more regularly than not about 14 months ago. But still, I did not want to believe that folks as powerful as you, folks with as big an audience as you have, folks that talk about the spirit world as eloquently as you do, I did not want to believe that you were anything but what you claimed to be. On a conscious level, I honestly had no intention of trying to prove or disprove this with my choice to book this trip. Not at all. I haven't had a vacation in 7.5 years. I am a mountain lover that lives in Florida. I am at a hugely pivotal time in my life when I knew I needed a spiritual reboot, and I had no awareness of another place such as yours. I was so excited to meet the 11 others from around the world, as the synchronicities of meeting people, given all my work travel, has been blowing my mind. I couldn't wait to see what Spirit had in store for me in terms of the 11 other travelers. I had been setting intentions for my San Pedro journey for weeks, and I was dreaming of hiking every day, taking in the mountain air, and enjoying your beautiful facilities. With that said, I also began feeling extremely anxious about 2 weeks ago, and the reason why has now been revealed. There is, in my opinion, very little gray area here. Yes, this was one heck of a fluke situation, but we are coming to your country, and we are booking through you, not through any sort of formal travel agency that very likely would have been aware of this law. This is not a U.S. government rule. This is not a Delta rule. This is an Ecuadorian law. And as such, it is absolutely your responsibility to have awareness on behalf of the travelers entrusting you. At a minimum, if you do not want to be accountable or responsible, at least guide those of us coming with some sort of checklist. There exists a high level of trust here, and you clearly are not acknowledging the very big role you hold and the responsibility that comes with that role. I travel all the time for work, domestically, but not leaving the U.S. There was absolutely no way I could or should have been expected to know of this law. I knew I needed a passport, and my passport had 5 months remaining before expiring. How could I have been expected to have the knowledge that this wasn't suffice for travel to Ecuador? Why would I even think to check anything other than having a valid passport? Additionally, I have copies of 2 messages to the woman who books these things. I have copies of 2 messages to her, double and triple checking everything I knew to check. My visa and transportation from Cuenca to your facility. I even mentioned to her in those messages that I haven't left the country for 9.5 years and that I didn't want to miss anything. This clearly demonstrates my due diligence. As for the airline, Delta recognized the insanity of the situation and credited back every frequent flyer mile that I cashed in for my flight. They also refunded every dollar of the $108 of the associated fees charged when cashing in my miles. They certainly were under no obligation to do so, yet Delta gave me everything back, and as such, more than compensated for their part of being the conduit of booking travel to countries with this law and not presently having anything in their system that notifies the traveler until just 24 hours beforehand. I did all I could have been expected to do. Delta made it more than right on their part, and that leaves you all. How you are choosing to handle this is unbelievable to me. Thus far, not one iota of responsibility has been taken. You have demonstrated 0 accountability, not one apology other than one directed at blame on the airline, not one acknowledgement of me as a human being and how incredibly huge this was for me. To have a trip like this pulled out from under me in an instant, and to have the folks that claim to be spiritual and leaders of their own community, a community of which I've been a part for almost a decade, dismiss me like a transaction has spoken louder than all the words that have ever come from your mouths. And the cherry on top, that unless I exchange the tuition for something else that you all offer, I lose 100% of the money I paid to you. The level of audacity is astounding. Obviously, I have no recourse here. I trusted you. When engaging in non-mainstream avenues of exchange, which this falls under, there is an inherent trust that the right thing for the greatest number of people will be done in instances such as this. I didn't even have an option for any sort of protection. And why would I consider that? If you were the people you claim to be, you would never feel this was the right thing to do. The true character of a human being is revealed during adversity. The integrity of a human being is shown when things go wrong, not when they go right. This was a fluke density thing that happened. We all can acknowledge that fact. However, given that it has never been something you have faced and that it isn't black and white, the fair, mature, evolved thing to do would be to evaluate this from all parties' perspectives and to share responsibility. At this time in my life, I cannot take any personal trips, but at this time of year. I travel over 15 weeks in any given year. October is my busiest month, and I'm already booked for an event in New Orleans for the March weekend. I would like a refund. I believe I deserve a refund. Even a 50% refund would be acceptable, as I know there are costs associated that you are already out of pocket. It is on your word if those costs are as high as you claim, because we weren't even set to leave your property. Other than food and facility costs, I'm not sure what you paid for ahead of time, but again, therein lies the opportunity for honesty, integrity, and trust. Given that this has never happened, though, I would be willing to share the responsibility, and as such, the loss. But to be asked to shoulder it 100% is most certainly, in my opinion, far, far from the right thing to do here. I have already lost over $400. My hotel at the Quito airport on the 28th, $161. My in-country flight with Tame, $100. My $70 transportation fee, which you all had 24 hours notice that I clearly was going to no longer require. Altitude drops, $35. And the money I spent on a soul costume, $40. The latter two things being things I never would have otherwise purchased, and for which I now have no use. And now you want me to also accept another $888? So my loss will be over $1,300, which, by the way, is only the financial component. The mental, emotional, and spiritual losses far exceed this. Even with the refund of $444, I will have lost almost $900. That would still be more than your loss if you refunded me all $888. I am not holding my breath that you will do right by me, which would be to refund me a minimum of $444. And personally, I believe if you were who you claim to be, you would refund me the entire amount. I thank you for being such a wonderful influence for the past 9 years, but I could never handle this in the way that you are believing is right. Never. And as such, this student has learned her final lesson from you. Thank you for this huge lesson of discernment and tremendous opportunity for practicing compassion, forgiveness, and release. To maintain a charade the size of yours, I have nothing but colossal compassion for you all. What Donald Trump is in the political world of America, you all are in the spiritual arena of the world. Clearly, you are playing your roles perfectly. And now I must play mine, and in this life, release you all forever. Sincerely, Alyson Irene Noune. This correspondence was sent to them on Monday, December 30th, 2019. And 24 hours later, approximately, I have not heard any response. I do not expect to hear any sort of response. I am fully accepting that I have lost over $1,300 on the surface level financial side, but truthfully, things that I'm not going to go into yet here, already the lessons gained, it's tough to put a monetary value on already what I feel like I've gained. And I do believe that will further reveal itself down the line. But for my time in my world and in my life right now, to one, not have had the experience, not be in those mountains that my soul literally was going to be fed by, and to lose that sort of money, not easy to swallow. But I'll tell you what, I'm super grateful that I learned this lesson from afar, for I do believe I would have seen through their shit very quickly, and likely it would have been a very miserable week down there. So I am grateful. Process it, chalk it up, And like I said, there will be at least one or two more recordings. Thank you for listening.